Hello, my name is Abel, and I got into this whole field, and I was all by an internship. I applied to be a presenter at Disney and Animal Kingdom with the Animals and Science and Environment team, and they introduced me to this world of informal ed. I went to school to be a teacher, and I was in the classroom, but I never realized that you can apply all those skills and learn more just by doing informal education, and that's how I started in this field. And I actually never went back to to be in the classroom. And at first it was scary, but throughout my learning all those things, learning the different skills, you can apply to any job. And I went from literally working with specific kids to working with so many people out there. And I love the animals, I love the science that was there, and I kind of went to the animal field, and that's when I met you.
Right.
And it was very interesting to see what I learned in school and being apply in a 4 or 5 minute lesson. And
Right.
to me, that just opened my eye to see a different field. But that's how I got into this, and that's how I met you. So it's been a crazy journey right now with what's going on, but
All
it's
right.
nice to still use those skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How long have you been doing it?
Ah,
From there
I
to
moved to Florida, right? So I moved to Florida in 2014. So I used to live in Arizona. That's where I went to school.
okay.
Um, so completely different atmosphere. Yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah.
been since 2014, 2015.
Yeah. So you are working in like recreation education now, right? Is that the idea?
Correct. Yeah. So I work as a recreation specialist. Now,
Mhm.
what's interesting is that my cool background, I actually took this picture of a Tibet butler.
Oh, cool.
And that, yeah, it's pretty
So that's
cool.
your
So
actual office there.
yeah, that's literally my office.
Hey,
I didn't
love
want to
that.
put my house.
Right.
Yeah. So how I got in there is that specific role
Mhm.
in a different recreation with Orange County is different,
Right.
because you'll be in a gym, but I'm still applying those skills that I've been learning. But it's going to be an informal setting. It's going to be in the woods, and it's all about conservation. So that's why my focus is, and that,
Yeah.
Zach, that it's always been I'm trying to help the animals, and people understand, that we can all live in peace.
Right.
But that's my office, and that's what I've been doing right now. It's a really cool job, but it's very unique. But right now we're not teaching, unfortunately, due to the situation.
Right.
But hopefully in the future we go back, either virtually or with um, CDC guidelines.
So that's actually leads me. That's a pretty interesting question. What sort of client, what sort of guest, what sort of experience do you offer through Orange County? Are they like big field trips? Or are they like individual, kind of
Yeah.
small?
So at before COVID, we were doing field trips, so we were teaching classes.
Okay.
They were about an hour, but working at Animal Kingdom, working at the Science Center in different places where you have those guests for 4 or 5 minutes. I still get regular guests,
Right.
and me working outside with my mask, but I still try to teach those things and using the formal skills, the formal education field. So I still trying to spread my conservation messages, teach them about science,
Yeah.
and for 5 minutes.
So from my understanding, right, you're working primarily outdoors for the whole time
Exactly.
you're doing the education.
Yeah, so that's part of my job, but I also do office as well. So, we do have, it's a recreation job. So we do have other fields that we take care of, but that
Cool.
means, people that play lacrosse and stuff like that. So I'm still applying, those skills of how to talk to people, how to talk to guests, not just for kids, but also adults. And it goes across the board. And the specific things that you're able to, explain things to adults as well. And
Yeah.
especially with teaching, we focus so much on, you have to have a lesson or you have to have this end product, but with
Right.
with formal education you can get a couple points that matter to those guests as well. So you always have to be in the in the shoes of those people, and that's how I try to teach, is that think of that critical thinking, plant that seed that is going to moving forward. Either it can be sports, it can be animals, it can be conservation, or it can be one thing that they can start doing.
Yeah. Well, with primarily your education material coming outdoors or happening outdoors, is there do you feel like there's a major difference that because of with the pandemic in mind, from being able to teach outdoors versus having to teach inside or in a classroom setting?
It just depends, especially when you teach indoors or even informal. I always like to use the five senses. So when you think of the stuff, of course, for tasting, when it comes to a regular lesson, right, you have to be prepared and stuff like that. But even me teaching outdoors, you still can get those points across. And that's what I learned during the pandemic, is that it's forcing people to go out. Unfortunately, of the situation right now, but it's nice to see people outdoors, and they're following their guidelines. But I still try to teach. But when it comes to seeing a difference, I think it just depends on how you look at it. And that's what I try to focus nowadays, is that, yes, it's unfortunate what we're doing, but we're still able to get our point across versus, in the regular classroom, or if you're outdoors. And that's what I'm noticing, is that positive reinforcement. I think people having more time and having the tools now, I always think of, if this happened, where technology or any Wi-Fi, I don't know how it would have been. But kids nowadays have so many resources in their fingertips, right? And I can just tell them one thing, and they can go and Google that. I like to say that too. But I try to stay very open, very positive, and it just depends how you look at it. I think it depends on the educator itself too, of what you want to achieve. And so I look at it as I don't see a bigger difference. Of course, you build a relationship if you spend longer time with the kids or with the parents, but I still try to get my point across whenever I can, because that's the role, I think, of an educator, is that somehow you're always preaching whatever you want to teach to the future generation.
I think I can agree with that a lot. At the end of the day, is the message coming full circle? Are the circuits connecting? And
exactly.
With the pandemic, you're a shining example. We can make those things happen. It's nice. I like that a lot.
It's cool to see the connections and the engagement, right? And I'm sure you've seen this here in Virginia. We've seen the trail usage, explode. Trails that I used to go hike and have totally by myself are now worn, really down to the bone every time I go out there. And part of me, of course, you always have that moment of there's other people out here on the trail to me. But then, as an environmental educator, I'm like, yes, there's other people out here on the trail with me. There's other people.
Oh my God.
Seeing the intrinsic value of nature and of the national parks, of the state parks, right?
Oh my God, that's literally me. Working together, and sure. I remember Zach and I were like, oh my God, excited. There's a lot of people out there. Let's go and teach us conservation messages. But when COVID hit, at first no one was out, and then slowly people were trying to get out, enjoy nature. And at first I was really upset, but I stopped and they go, why? This is a positive thing. People are going out and learning about their backyard, working at a place where it's so close to Disney. People used to pass it all the time. It's in a major road. So, everybody's going to Disney. So now I talk to people, I go, I've been living here for 30 years and never been to this place. And I'm glad that, we're getting that word out there that, hey, Disney's awesome, but sometimes you cannot go to Disney. So you have to improvise, especially living in Florida. It's such a huge tourism area. But like Zach said, I'm happy people are on the trails and, learning about Florida and learning about their, whether the past, but also this is their future as well.
Yeah, and I mean that's really the point of it all, right? Is that difference? That's where the value add is. That's the real takeaway.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see. I'm still applying those things. Sometimes I stop and I'm like, oh yeah, I used to do this, or I used to do this. I haven't been teaching, but due to the situation, but I just go into that mode. And I think that's a nice skill to have as an informal educator, is that you're always teaching, which is nice.
And it's not always just the guest or the client or the person coming to experience the opportunity. I think you touched on it a little bit. Sometimes it's your fellow coworkers, right? It's your team. How do you communicate amongst your team? I see so often in clients and people in the industry that the experiential educators, the education team, they know how to communicate effectively, externally, and most importantly, internally, right? Most businesses would tell you a lot of their inefficiencies evolve from ineffective internal communication, right? Whether it's those big, long emails that don't have a video or don't have an image attached, right? So it sounds like you're able to take those nuances that you learn and apply it to your teamwork, right?
Yeah. And I remember one thing is that working with you, you were showing me a picture. It was a cool fact about an animal, and you were saying, okay, these are the cool facts, and you asked me what is it missing, and I was like, it's a picture, and you and I were like, you're right, it doesn't have a picture. I could talk about a cool snake, but again, anything translate to my coworkers or everything. And believe it or not, I'm known as the animal guy in my job because I'm the only one with that role.
Yeah.
So I'm the animal guy, and I'm still teaching to them, and it's a different learning style or different age group as well. So not everyone knows how to Google something, so you gotta apply what you can. Man, I do it like you mentioned it. Yeah, it's just using automatic mode. I'm always going back. Okay,
Sure.
Visual, picture, point. It's pretty cool.
It is. It is. Absolutely. Yeah, it's an incredibly valuable thing. While you're talking, it just makes me a really good facet, a really good quick point for communication is learning that ability to absorb and condense, right? And that's really what it comes down to. That's how we get those huge long emails, these big points, these paragraphs and paragraphs and pages of information, as interpreters to the guest so quickly, right? We've got to learn how to absorb and condense, and that's just one more way that it can go into the internal side. It's great to actually hear it from you that you've been able to use that.
Yeah, and again, you also, we as an interpreters and trying to get all this data across, I always put myself on the guest perspective, on your coworker perspective. It's like not everyone is an animal person. Not everyone is an expert on something. And Zach mentioned to this when I used to work with Zach, is like he told me, everyone knows something that you don't know. And it's true, is that I might be an expert on animals, but once you make that connection with the guest, they might be teaching you something. And then again, that goes into your teaching tool, and especially with informal ed, is that you learn from the guests too, and then they love that. Right. If you're able to say, "Oh, I didn't know that," you see the spark, or it's pretty cool to see that, and you can see it in their eyes. And again, is that reading your audience is very important too, but you have to think of the guest, think of the person, the coworker that comes into your job. It doesn't have to be animals, but they don't know a lot of those things. So you might say the same fact 3,000 times, but you have to understand, hey, this might be the shining moment of the next scientist, of the next president, of the next historian.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's 100%
you said my favorite phrase is that you can see that. And I think that's going to end up being the series' kind of catchphrase.
Yeah, I think anytime you talk to a group of informal educators, right, that's what drives us forward, is seeing that spark, seeing that matchstick moment, seeing the light bulb click, whatever turn of phrase you want to use. Everybody, that's what drives them forward. You'll have a long, hot day, and you'll come home covered in sweat, or you'll come home covered in dirt or soot, or you'll come home covered in animal feces. And what keeps you going, right, is that moment where the child lit up or the adult lit up, right? And that's always really inspiring to see. So I think that's really cool that you've made that connection, and you're able to find unique and diverse ways to make that happen.
Yeah, you have to, as an informal education, that's the first thing, is that you have to connect to them, because I can be the best reptile keeper, I can be the best educator in math, but if I'm not connecting to my audience, then we're not reaching anything, because they're gonna remember, well, he was just talking about facts, but he didn't mention where I'm from. As an informal educator, we connect in such a unique way. It can be 5-10 minutes, but once you ask them where you're from or what you do, or what's something interesting about this conversation, or if you ask, do you have any questions, and you're able to just know them, that you're listening to them, is very important too, because I can just have this conversation and fact after fact, and then sometimes people leave because I was not able to connect. And as an educator, you always have to reflect, Not always, not the audience sometimes can be challenging. You may get specific comments that may get under your skin, and that's just because we're all different. They have different opinions, but as an educator, especially being in this field of just informal, is that you have to let them know that their opinion is validated. But if you're able to teach them one thing, that's fine. That's a win.
Yeah.
And how would you take, your experiences so far, right, in this recreation field, right? This is a pretty unique field. It's, I'd say, adjacent to informal education and where most of us got our roots. Somebody who's coming up, right? Somebody who's 6-7 years ago, right? Just out of school, flying across the country, has this new opportunity. How would you tell them is the best way, right, to make it down the path that you're on now? What's a skill they really should work on? What's something, an experience, an internship that they should try to tackle? Do you have any advice give advice to yourself 7 years ago?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's great. I think to be not to be scared. We go to school, or we've been in this. Sometimes you focus so much on I went to school to do this. I went to school to be in the classroom, so I'm meant to be. And sometimes we're so harsh on ourselves, and then you just have to give it a try. If I think is the spark, the curiosity of let me try it, and if I failed, that's okay. And I think in this parks and recreation field is that we interact with so many guests from different ages. Sometimes it's not a good day, but it just translates to it's a new thing, it's a new adventure, and you just got to keep moving forward. You just don't be afraid of trying new things. And I will say that to people that want to be in this role is to give it a try, because there's so many opportunities. And moving here, learning English, there's so many tools here in this country that so many of us can use. You can just YouTube something, and then use those things to your ability. You don't have to go to the library and get a book. No, you can easily Google something and apply for that internship. And if it sounds interesting, if there's that tickle right in your brain, go for it. I would say just go for it. And if you make a mistake, that's okay. That's one thing that I do when it comes to teaching and recreation, is that if you make a mistake, we can fix it. Because if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning. And the thing that I always say to my students and guests is that you don't remember when it's easy, you remember when it's hard. When that concept is hard, you remember those things because your brain is working even more. So again, if you failed, keep going. That's the advice that I have, is that be curious, go for it. And if you try it, try it twice, maybe 3 times. If it's not for you, then find something where your passion is. But don't be afraid of trying something new, especially with social media. There's so many things out there that you can find some really cool internships in wherever you're living. And like I said, as an educator, but also as a recreation specialist, you just have to move forward and try new things.
Right. I love the curiosity. I love the drive. Simply can't top those words of advice. By far one of the greatest, most inspiring, genuine, self-taught educators that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. It was great catching up with you again today, Abel. I really enjoyed our chat.
Yeah,
to seeing where the recreation Parks and Rec takes you, from formal education, Parks and Rec, to working with alligators hands-on. It's pretty exciting to see.